So, today we have a very important topic to deal with. Chosen one of the most difficult one actually to reflect upon. But before we are coming to that, I would like to make first some clarification if possible. For example, difference between religiousness and spirituality. People perceive it differently, and so I will just speak about my own feeling, what for me is the difference. I regard spirituality as something where you go for the highest, to become the highest actually, to merge into the highest or whatever. Religious approach is more to feel devoted, to pay respect, devotional respect, to bow down in front of this enormousness. So the religiousness has more this dualistic kind of reverent distance. It may be understood as a service to the highest, or the preparatory building up the merits and good qualities to go on. Also, I would say that the religious approach is more playing on the strings of emotions of the heart. Emotional, which means that the outward form plays quite a decisive role. So the atmosphere, the candles, the statues, the colors, the bowing and all these things. With the spiritual approach, I would consider it more advanced. It has also faith, very much important role for the faith, but also the wisdom. There is a balanced importance or accentuation of faith and wisdom. They should work together on the path of spirituality. And for the spiritual approach, you go into it with your full life also. So that's my understanding how I use spirituality and religiousness. And let's be clear that they blend very much. And that the religiousness can quite sudden change into spirituality. It grips the devotional person so strongly that it is the evidently spiritual approach then after. And the spirituality goes into more earthly like practical care for the life. It is blending very much one into the other. The other thing I wanted to put at the beginning, to make it clear what is the Buddha's real intensity of his teaching in the full scale, when we go into full scale. And for that, I am using this particular image, the diver suit, to understand what the full-scale original Buddha's teaching is all about. because this is the prelude for that I am going to talk about. And if you don't understand this, you will not be successful in the today's talking. For Buddha, this human condition and any other living being's condition is comparable to the diver of the last century. You know, this very heavy suit with the lead shoes and the helmet with the windows, with the small windows. Actually, in the Buddhist case, 6 little windows to contact the outer world, so to say. You know, this diving suit is the parable for mind and body. And the Pugala, the person, is the carrier of this heavy load, heavy suit, mind and body. In this case, the suit is really representing both the mind and the body. And the Pugala is inside. You know, I am relying on the Sutta Samyutta Nikaya 22:22, where the Buddha is declaring that the Pugala, the person, the you, is the carrier of the 5 khandhas, which 5 khandhas actually means the body, the materiality, and the mind. Mind and the body, 5 khandhas. And the Pugala, the person, is the carrier of this heavy load. And this is our condition in the human embodiment, in the human living. When we were born, we were squeezing down into this tight suit of mind and body, sinking down into the human condition. The lead shoes is bringing the feature landing in the material human world. This narrow kind of existence frequencies, squeezing ourselves into human mind and body. And this is the message of the full-scale Buddha's teaching. This is the condition of any birth, be it from the womb, be it from the egg, be it from the moisture, be it the spontaneous birth in some spiritual frequencies of living condition. Being born into the time flow of that particular spheres of existence. What is quite important to understand, that from the Buddha's position to look down into the human conditions of existence, this is a very pitiful condition connected with some worldly happiness and lots of unsatisfactoriness as well. And what is probably for Buddha the more problematic condition of this human condition is these limitations of the humans, of the human mind and body. As I said, from the Buddha's perspective, to fall down, to squeeze into the human condition, to squeeze into animal conditions, to squeeze into deva condition, to squeeze into the godlike condition, or some ghost or hell condition, whatever birth may appear, this appearing in a particular dimension of existence. It is always something very, very limited. And by definition, connected with quite concrete, clear suffering, or in the godlike spheres with the bombardment of sankharas, even the extremely subtle consciousness, high frequency consciousness in the godlike, deva-like, beautiful, splendid, shiny existences. Still there is a time flow. Even these beings are conditioned and kind of as subordinate to a time flow. So still this subtle mind and consciousness is bombarded with sankharas, results of karma. Without this clear understanding, we cannot understand the full scale of Buddha's teaching. Now, if we take the first Buddha's discourse, Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, to his spiritual friends, his first discourse after enlightenment, he was talking about 4 noble truths. And this is the teaching accessible even to the normal human mind. It's true that the full understanding of the 4 noble truths is usually reserved for the arahats, but any kind of, actually, even the Sotapanna enlightenment has already quite a solid understanding of the 4 noble truths, which means there is an unsatisfactoriness, it has a cause, the cause of this unsatisfactoriness can be removed, and the 4th noble truth, how to do it. Even people from the street can somehow see something good in that, to be inspired in that, and it may be the entry into deeper understanding of the four noble truths, and particularly the Eightfold Noble Path, that this recipe how to do it, that it has particular areas, it covers the whole life needs to be transformed. Okay. So this is a thing which will be usually presented in the summer school and public lectures and on the retreats and so on. But on later occasions, Buddha would give the full scale of his teaching, the Paticca Samuppāda, the full scale of reality, with many different frequencies of existence. It is portrayed in this. I am using very often this beautiful diagram of 31 spheres of existence, where the human is only one of 31. Quite low, actually. To understand that the humans are only a very limited sphere of appearances. Our so-called worldly reality is just interpretation of reality of completely different category, and moreover that the particular existence is actually endless chain of existences, when the death means always just end of particular life term, but because the karmic potentially is not extinguished, it will initiate a new existence, very probably in some different sphere of existence. Thus, running around in samsara means endless reappearance in loops of time. The time is not endless linear line, and the old sages were always understanding the reappearance of time. And this, only this, gives the full scale of understanding what samsara means. This endlessness, this meaninglessness connected with unsatisfactoriness. So only now we are really ready for a meaningful approach to a Buddha's teaching of dependent origination. We have this Tibetan tankas which are portraying actually not only the Paticca Samuppāda, which would be this outer ring, but also the different spheres of existence. Here it is divided into 6 fields of existence, and the center of the whole running round, the axis being the lobha, dosa, moha, these 3 roots of everything unwholesome: greed, hatred, delusion. That's the axis the whole samsara is running round. These 6 spheres of existence, the human is here. These are the hungry ghosts in the Tibetan teachings, usually addressed as a bardo, where attached beings to the human condition cannot really follow its karmical destiny and are locked in this in-between state of the hungry ghost. Because depending on karma which is activated in the time of dying, the beings would go rather to some heavenly sphere, which is actually here, or to the asuras, the demons, or animal realms, or the hell realm, or back to the human condition. This would be the kind of rough picture of the spheres of existence of power. The demonic characteristic is this power, hungry for power. The hungry ghosts are rather greedy, just greedy. Animals not very intellectual, and the hell, hatred. That would be the characteristics of this. And the devas, the sensual devas, with refinement of consciousness going up, then the gods, and the brahmas, and the very pure shiny devas, and the immaterial spheres. So this is the bhumis, the fields or frequencies of existence, frequencies which are inhabited by beings. We are now stuck in the human frequencies. You can imagine it as a radio stations, different frequencies with different broadcasting. Those who are tuned to a particular frequency, all of them are getting the same broadcasting, interpreting the phenomena in the same way. That's our characteristics of our human condition. The reality is immaterial, this phenomena, and we are interpreting it as a world around us and myself in it. The others, beings in another frequencies, the same. They are, according to the frequency of the activated consciousness, the frequency of that will interpret probably another layer of reality, of the real reality, the full reality, into their apparent world. This is the samsara. So now, coming to the dependent origination topic, the first thing which comes to my mind, Ajahn Brahm was suggesting to regard this Tibetan tanka as a mirror. First, I did not really understand it. Mirror. You want to see yourself in the mirror. That would be the function of the mirror. Now, this picture, containing the Paticca Samuppāda, that's the outer ring, and the different spheres of existence, the heavenly and the hellish, the ghosts, the demons, animals, humans. How this is the mirror? Yes. Then it clicked. Of course, all these spheres, these are spheres of our life experience. The mind is creating these spheres of existence. And in a traditional way, this would be spheres to be reborn in. After the body dies here, it goes somewhere else, or even again to the human spheres. But you can regard it also as states of mind even during this particular present life. That we go in the hell when we are full of hate, and we go into the heaven when our heart is full of compassion and loving kindness. We are in the hungry ghost when we are running to the refrigerator. We are the demons when we are looking for the power. The animals are said not to be very intellectual. And the humans are the mixed ones, where the karmic forces are from both sides, the good and the not so good. So, this is also quite an important message right in the beginning, before we start to really deal with the conditions and all that all the samsara is actually mind-made. That would be one of the biggest messages of Paticca Samuppāda, of the Buddha's teaching, in a very advanced, very high understanding inside. It needs a deep insight. We are projecting these creations of the neurons, we are projecting it outward as a world around us. There is some objective reality. But it is not that what we are perceiving around us. What the objective reality really is, Buddha did not give any clear indications. He would indicate that the materiality is insubstantial. He compared the materiality of the world and of the body to the bubbles, to the foam, which, 2,000 years ago would be to prompt that actually that what we see so hard and solid actually is insubstantial in its real nature. That the form, the shape, the hardness, these are just qualities, the four: earth, water, fire, air, these elements. That has nothing to do with Mendeleev periodical table of elements. That's a different approach. No, these 4 elements are the qualities by which the brain is creating this perception of material world in the body and around us. These are just features. So, also this Paticca Samuppāda, it's possible to understand it in 2 different ways. In a material way, and we will talk about it, as birth, the embryonic stage, fetus, coming to the existence or the experience, creating karma, which leads to the next birth, this rebirth theory. That would be the more or less materialistic, worldly way of understanding Paticca Samuppāda. And certainly there is a support for that in the sutta as well. Buddha actually gives one example of that. But really, to understand the depth of the Paticca Samuppāda, this goes into the process understanding of existence. Phenomenology, we would say. Just phenomena, material and mental phenomena happening. And out of that, our so-called life consists of that. So, there are actually many ways to apply this wisdom of Paticca Samuppāda. Actually, I think that the physics and astrophysics and nuclear physics, quantum physics, I think it is under the table inspiring itself from the wisdom of these oldest sages. The objective reality, what it is really. Like the oldest way, one of the oldest way, just a vibration. Om. Vibration. The primordial ground of everything. It looks like a string theory. Everything just vibration. But vibration actually is still energy. And in one sutta, Rohitassa Sutta, Buddha is revealing that the world is in this fathom-long body. So you cannot say that the all energy of the whole universe with all the atom bombs and quasars, that it is in this body. So we must go one step further. Pure information. Perhaps the objective reality is only information. That would be the computer way of explaining everything. You can create on the monitor, on the screen of consciousness, you can create anything. And that would be immaterial and not energetic, just information. You can go perhaps even one step further than that everything is just a net of conditioning. And that looks very much like the Paticca Samuppāda from Buddha. That the last end, or what's only real on the whole thing, is just immaterial, unsubstantial conditioning, net of conditionings, which gets down even to the existence of being, of worlds, of existence. So I think the physics is owing something to the old wisdom, like with the multiverse. It was not long ago, nobody in the science would dare to think of parallel universes. I don't know if it was the Dirac came with the equation which would have two different solutions, the plus solution and the minus solution. as if there would be the minus universe, to compensating this kind of a creation. There must be, to keep the balance, there must be minus of everything. It would look exactly as this one, only everything would be in a minus, antimatter, anti-energy. And then, now to speak about multiverse is absolutely scientifically possible things, which actually is the oldest idea, omniverse. All these different universes. I remember the lecture some 45 years ago. A student of Muktananda came to Switzerland. I was a layman, of course. I was quite curious about these things, and he was presenting the spiritual idea of reality. This multiverse, omniverse, hierarchical order of universes with the Aleph on the top. I remember it until today. I think the science owes some inspiration to the spirituality. But now, coming to the Paticca Samuppāda, I was indicating that there is a possibility to understand it in different ways. Even in the suttas, it appears in different modifications, the different applications, even that. And it seems that this 12 links of dependent originations, that's Theravada. That's the kind of a canonized Theravadin's way of understanding what the Buddha taught. But if we go into Sutta Nipata, which is regarded to be the oldest record of original Buddha's utterances and teachings, there the Paticca Samuppāda goes only to the consciousness, which is the link number 3. How Buddha actually reflected as a bodhisattva, short before his great opening, really. Some teachers would even think that the reflection of Paticca Samuppāda led to or triggered the great enlightenment of the Buddha. It is something which goes far beyond human rational logic, reflections and thinking. No, this is a really bursting out of the limits of human conditioning to see with the wisdom eye the great order of samsara, so to say. When Buddha reflects, he starts with the things as they are. The human condition to be prone to illness, old age, death, suffering, mental suffering, bodily suffering. This is the things which is prompting the Buddha to look for solution. And it seems to be the quest, spiritual quest of his time, to find the solution for this. Not necessarily for the sunny side of the life, but for the inevitable dark side of existence, and not only of the human existence. Any kind of existence which is submerged into the time flow. Buddha was not using this term time flow. He was using everything is conditioned, which for us is perhaps not so very appealing or urging something to do about it. But if we understand that everything is subordinate to time flow, then the thought of dying and death and old age and sickness anytime, all these things suddenly are becoming very real as a part of our existence. And that may prompt us and urge us to do something about it. So when Buddha was reflecting these things, he started actually with this Nidana number 12, with the condition of human life, what is the cause of the problem? And we may think that in his great wisdom that he would discover some magic formula for healing this unsatisfactoriness of existence, deeply ingrained in the fabric of existence itself. That he will know some miraculous medicine for that. No. What he, with his greatest possible scope of wisdom, as the real cause of that, is Nidana number 11. Birth. You were born. And, to have the body and mind, that's the recipe for troubles. Subscription. You are subscribing already for toothache, headache, stomachache, back pain, injuries, accidents, illnesses, cancer, terminal illness, dying. So within this lifetime you can heal by the help of Buddha's teaching mental suffering, and that's true. If you really practice very deeply Buddha's advices, you can get completely free of mental suffering. Even the things will come at you at the normal speed, unprotected by some miraculous shield. No. You will be bombarded with these nasty accusations and wrong understandings and all that. But, the parable is the lotus leaf. Everything will roll down, not finding any hooks where it can stick. Teflon mind in a modern expression. And nothing can burn in such a protected mind by healing the mind to its healthy form. Impossibility to be mentally injured. One of the features of real awakening. So mentally, really, you can practice so that you don't suffer mentally anymore. But the body will give troubles. So the parable from the scriptures, being shot with 2 arrows. So you can actually remove the first one. Mental suffering can be cured. But the bodily suffering, bodily dukkha, pain, bodily pain, that will remain even with the arahat. Certainly it can be somehow attenuated by mental detachment and so, but still, the parable is clear. You are shot with 2 arrows. So even the arahats actually experience bodily pain. So this is actually quite a shocking message from the Paticca Samuppāda, and rarely it will be taught in the full scale. That actually where Buddha is seeing the real solution for all dukkha, first of all, not to be born. Therefore I was bringing this picture of the diver to understand what Buddha means. Some people misunderstand the Buddha's teaching to be a teaching of annihilation, just to disappear, to dissolve oneself, whatever. that's misappropriation of the teaching, misunderstanding. Buddha always mentioning and teaching these two wrong extremes, to be or not to be, to exist and not exist. These are the two wrong ends, and Buddha is teaching the great middle way of becoming free from the five khandhas, body and mind. Go back to the picture of the diver. Therefore, I was so insisting on correct understanding what Buddha means by liberation, to be free from mind and body, from the five khandhas, from the materiality and mentality. That the Nibbāna is, or means, to be free from body and mind. And remember the Pugala. I am relying on the Samyutta Nikaya 22:22, the burden. That's the name of this sutta. When Buddha is clearly stating that the Pugala is the carrier of this heavy load, of the five khandha, of the mind and body. And he's instructing to put down the load. And who is carrying the load? The Pugala, the you. And what is the you? Ajahn Sumedho, he gives it kind of a clever answer. The consciousness. Consciousness, well, but not the mental and sensory consciousness. The awareness, the Vijnana Anidasana Anantaram Sabatopadam, the objectless consciousness radiating in all directions. So if you wish, you can identify with that. Actually, it's not clear what is meant by this very special kind of awareness, which is in the suttas. This is the oldest teaching, actually. Some people say this is the nirvana. Well, it may be understood. This is the nirvana of Arahat when he meditates and goes into pala-samapatti, in the experience of nibbana during the life. This lokutara citta. Well, whatever. But now I think we are ready to go for the Paticca Samuppāda in a brief way, reflecting the chain of this conditioning. These are conditions, grounds. These are grounds for arising of the next one. But as the Buddha is looking for the first cause of everything, he goes actually backwards. So the cause for all the troubles of life and existence, he is discovering the birth. Birth from the womb, birth from the egg, birth from the moisture, and the spontaneous birth. In one sutta, Buddha is explaining each of these nidanas very, very clearly. And then, what is the cause of the birth? Now it goes difficult. It's hard to understand with a human worldly mind, to understand this kind of a reason or cause. Bhava, becoming. In the explanation, Buddha says it is kind of a drive to become in the sensual sphere, in the fine material sphere, or to become in the immaterial sphere. It is like the drive to become, to be born, kind of a conception. In the human sphere, you can understand it as a conception. But now, what is the cause of that, of this drive? of this accumulated karmic potential. Upadana, attachment. What is the cause of attachment? Craving, desire. What is the cause of that? Feeling. Pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling. When the feeling arises, there is always kind of a mostly subconscious, automatic reaction to it. That would be the craving, the reaction. What is the cause of the feeling? Contact between organ, object, and consciousness. We can take it this way. Something coming into the field of awareness. There is a contact of the organ, consciousness with the object. And this can be material or even mental. Passa. Now, what is the reason for contact? The sensory and mental equipment, the base for this kind of experience. That's the salayatana. What is the cause for that? Nama rupa, mind and body. What is the cause for mind and body? Consciousness. Well, consciousness, sensory and mental consciousness. Buddha is clearly defining this as 6 kinds of consciousness, 6 kinds of experience. The visual experience, audible experience, smelling experience, tongue experience, taste, touching experience, mental experience. To define this vijnana, to translate it as a consciousness, it's not wrong, but it's also not really covering the whole meaning, especially in this Paticca Samuppāda, in the dependent origination. And it seems that in the original oldest form of Paticca Samuppāda, in the Sutta Nipata, it really ends up with this kind of jivit indriya, life faculty also, faculty of experience, consciousness, sensory consciousness, mental consciousness, that. But in the Theravada, also in another expositions of the Paticca Samuppāda, Buddha goes even further than that. What is the cause of this? Sankharas, in this case karma, previous karma, old karma, potential, karmic, unexpressed potential. And what is cause for the sankhara? Avijjā, not knowing how the things really are. The root cause of all this mass of unsatisfactoriness. Not knowing the Four Noble Truths deeply. So this avijjā, this delusion, sometimes translating, it's a special kind of not knowing. It's not knowing that today is, I don't know, Thursday or what. No, it is a kind of a blindness, a distortion, very basic distortion, that we do not perceive the things as they really are. So this was the patiloma, direction of reasoning, coming to the first cause. It is sometimes more understandable when we go in the anuloma, in the clockwise, kind of a reflecting this Paticca Samuppāda, because of our distortion by ego as self-centeredness. We are living in a distorted way. We are injuring the balance, the ground balance of nature. We are creating the karmic potential. There is a hungry trace remaining behind our living. karma, thirsty line. And I was imagining it like a lake, accumulated lake of what we owe to the situations of the past always, and of the present. This is the karma, what we give too much to the situation or what we owe to the situation. This disbalance, that's the karmic potential. It is like a big lake, and of course the nature looks for kind of a balance. It's even the second law of thermodynamics. Entropy, just. So the karma, like a big lake, we are not living everything of the karma. It's like a sand watch, there is a big container of sand, but coming through a narrow hole, one corn of the sand after the other. So sankharas would be this. Actually, I was rather imagining, how is it possible that the karmic potential can kindle or trigger a consciousness? I was imagining that at one area, this lake of karma is getting very excited, hot, very hot, starting to boil, bubbles coming, bubbles catching fire, and that was my imagine how actually the sankharas, this boiling karma, can trigger the fire of consciousness. It is in one sutta where Buddha is comparing these 6 kinds of consciousness, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, mental consciousness, 6 kinds, to the 6 kinds of fire. This is the Buddha's kind of looking what the existence, what the life really is. It's a kind of burning. And with his teaching, he tries to extinguish this fire. Nibbāna, cooling, going to the middle. So, avijjā paccaya sankhara, the delusion, because of delusion we are living out of balance. This karmic potential can trigger the fire of consciousness. The consciousness, the vijnāna, paccaya, nama, rupa, mind and body. Now, here you can understand it in the material way. Actually, in one sutta, Buddha calls this vijnāna gandhabba. 3 things needs to come together: the mother in the proper period, the father, and gandhabba. And this would be the vijnāna of the Paticca Samuppāda. But here, really, gandhabba would be like the being on the other side, or stream of consciousness, better to say, if we want to be proper with the Buddhist terminology. There's just stream of consciousness from the other side wants to become somebody in the human sphere. So, process of rebirth. Mother, father, gandhabba. Conception. Conception and nama rupa would be, in this case, mind and body, the embryonic stage. And the next one, the salayatana, this 6 bases of the senses and the mind, would be the fetal state of the being, of the human child. And after the birth, there is the contact, perhaps already in the womb. There is kind of experience starting to happen. And contact always now, already with the birth itself, quite an unpleasant contact, being born into this 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional world. Unpleasant sensation, pleasant sensations, mental kind of imprints and all that. The life begins. And during the life there is always a rapid sequence of these nidanas, contact, feeling, reaction, crystallizing in attachment, and this is the process of living all the time, repeating high speed actually. Just to speak here, it's a very quick, rapid sequence of mental moments, mental procedures, with some seeing, with some reflecting, high speed, and all this is running. So here the sensory equipment leads to the process of life, crystallizing in the attachment, and then bhava, it may be understood also as unconscious or almost the instinct drive for living, thirst for the living, which leads to conception, birth, and that what follows inevitably: old age, sickness, death, unsatisfactoriness, and satisfactoriness, the worldly satisfactoriness and happiness, nothing much really, cannot outweigh the negative side or negative reality. Happy living people may get quite a positive balance of their life because they have a good karma repenting in this life, so they would say that they have more happy experiences than the unhappy experiences. But for this case also the heavenly existence, very blissful, still there is this, the consciousness, the pure, subtle, very pure consciousness is bombarded with these sankharas, these moments of perception. That's the nama actually, being bombarded with sankharas, always something appearing on the screen of consciousness as an impulse. Sankharas are just the bubbles, just the impulses, and the mind develops the life of it. As I said already, when we look at the Tibetan Tanka, what comes first into our awareness is this monster holding the circle of life in the claws and teeth. This is the Mahakali, the god of time flow. Everything is happening only in the flow of time, conditionate or subordinate to a time flow. That's the monster, as a symbol of samsara, time flow. Actually, the Tankas are using a very lively graphic pictures, which is sometimes even more precise or more accurate than the descriptions itself. For the avijjā, for the blindness, for the delusion, a blind man in a rocky landscape full of holes and hills, stolpering, can fall any time, dangerous condition. For the sankharas, for the karma, beautiful image, potter. The karma is the clay, and he is making giving shape to things. This sankhara, giving shape, mental formations. Very often it is translated as a mental formations. The vijnana, monkey going bananas. Consciousness gripping after objects. Nama rupa, mind and body, two people in a boat, but usually there are three people in the boat, so the consciousness actually is also in the boat, but the simile of this is quite strong. Just two or three people in a boat in the endless ocean, this primordial loneliness of mind and body. All the other beings are just appearances on the screen of consciousness. In the meditation, sometimes this can come so strongly, it will not last very long. It is one of the experiences you can get in a vipassana meditation, this enormous loneliness. The Salayatana, very beautiful, is an image of a building with 6 little windows. So I was actually giving the diver with the 6 little windows in the helmet. We approach the world around us. The contact, that's very intimate, a kind of a making love together, very intimate connection indeed. The feeling, how Buddha is perceiving any kind of feeling, arrow in the eye. So painful when the Buddha from the liberated position is reflecting the flow of life. Tanha, the craving, it's a drunkard, to be deluded, drunk, to be drunk by pleasant and unpleasant feelings. Here, for upadana, for attachment, is again a monkey. I prefer actually the picture. Here are the Tibetan picture in a modern way. I should certainly mention the authors of these drawings. Holger Heinrich and Helge Bornsen made more apparent pictures. These are the same pictures actually, but for the upadana, for the attachment, they took another picture. Here it is the monkey again gripping after fruits. No, here it is somebody collecting fruits into a big basket. This, for me, it's a much better kind of illustration what attachment actually is. You are collecting karma into the big basket. The bhava, becoming, is here actually as a conception, a pregnant woman, the birth, woman giving birth, and the marana, soka parideva, is a man carrying a corpse to the graveyard. That's very identical in this birth and death and suffering. So as I said, you can regard it as a sphere of really material or fine material rebirth, or as sorts of experience, mental atmosphere in the mind. And axis of samsara, greed, hatred, delusion. These 3 roots of everything unwholesome, compared with the 3 animals. So this is the whole teaching of Paticca Samuppāda. As I said, there are different understandings of it. Some people prefer the modern way, like Ajahn Buddhadasa was bringing a very beautiful kind of understanding that it is not necessarily relating to birth of a being, but how the idea of self is born. Within our life, within every day, many times we are becoming somebody. When we go to the office, different somebody in the family, in the club, in the gym, in the church, always being somebody else, and applying this kind of Paticca Samuppāda to this ego, birth of ego. Very beautiful. or already in the Abhidhamma, attempts to apply the Paticca Samuppāda on every moment of consciousness, cittaviti, the arising and passing away of cittaviti, which are extremely rapid sequence in the process of life. We can apply the Paticca Samuppāda in different scope. My particular, I am kind of a spiritual inventor, I guess. Of course, I created also my own kind of understanding of Paticca Samuppāda to picture the Paticca Samuppāda as a circle. That's not the original way. Somewhere I read this appeared only after the 3rd century AD to make a kind of a circular picture of Paticca Samuppāda, which is good, running around, wheel turning, that's quite nice, actually, that's good. But originally it was rather understood as a kind of a line or a bow. And I noticed that in this 12 links of the classical Paticca, dependent origination, actually 4 times there are kind of a complete 5 khandhas, mind and body, in a kind of a complete way. So starting, or going backwards rather, jati and marana, birth and death, that's already one kind of a complete living. The middle part, quite a large one, which would rather represent every moment our experience, this one turning very, very quickly. Then the consciousness and nama-rupa, actually this also represent the 5 khandhas, mind and body. And the creation of karma, let's say in the previous existence, is also kind of a complete entities, living entity, creating karma. So I was kind of reflecting, if we take the illusion of time out of it, like already now, to be a result of some past Paticca Samuppāda, we are now right here. Also, our life is taking place every moment anew. We are right now mind and body. We are like the avijjā manifestation of not really knowing how the things are and creating karma right now, like acting in all these 4 at the same time. Suddenly it came, if you take the time out of it, we are living the Paticca Samuppāda with every second of our life. In all these 4 different perspectives taking place right now. We are the result of past. We are creating the foundation for the future. We are running the time flow forwards with our craving and attachments. So, just to bring something at the end of this long talk. Now, what kind of lesson we should take from the Paticca Samuppāda teachings? Each of these nidanas actually would kind of break the chain, but we have been already born, so there is not much to do with that. In the teaching of Buddha, there are 2 instances in this Paticca Samuppāda where the chain of conditioning can be broken. And it is between the feeling and craving. The second noble truth, the dukkha, the unsatisfactoriness, has a cause, the craving. And the third noble truth it can be stopped, it can be cured. So that would be actually to apply mindfulness on here, not blindly reacting to our feelings. That would be here. But in this Paticca Samuppāda, actually, Buddha is mainly focusing on the avijjā, to correct our perception by insight, to see the things as they really are. And in the Upanishad Sutta, this yatha bhuta jnana dassana, this is the correction, to see the things clearly, which automatically heals this kind of blind following, rolling around the samsara in our mind, in our life. So may we practice correctly the Buddha's teaching, to see the things as they really are, to understand the quite difficult things to understand, that we are squeezed in the limitations of mind and body. And to be free of the 5 khandhas means to open up to final liberation.